As the sun sets over the Thames, a seasoned sailor named Marlowe sits on a cruising yawl, looking out at the sprawling commercial heart of the British Empire. But instead of praising this pinnacle of modern industry, he turns to his fellow sailors and points out that 2,000 years ago, when the Romans first arrived, this exact river was one of the dark, savage places of the earth. That unsettling observation comes from Joseph Conrad. In his 1899 novella, Heart of Darkness, Conrad sets out to dismantle the most comforting European narrative of his time, the idea that colonialism was a noble crusade to civilize the globe. Through his narrator, Marlowe, we hear the confession of a man who spent his childhood staring at maps. He was mesmerized by the vast blank spaces of unexplored continents, particularly a massive river in Africa coiled like a sleeping snake. When Marlowe finally secures a job captaining a river steamboat for a Belgian trading company, his aunt is overjoyed. She proudly calls him an emissary of light, sent to wean ignorant millions from their horrid ways. But her glowing rhetoric immediately collides with what Marlowe actually encounters. The upcoming expedition is completely detached from any moral purpose, exposing a brittle gap between the stories an empire tells itself and the brutal mechanics of how it operates. That collision starts the moment Marlowe arrives at the company's European headquarters. He describes the city as a whited sepulchre, impeccably clean and monumental on the outside, but holding death and decay within. Inside the silent, heavily shadowed offices, he passes two older women knitting black wool. They sit guarding the door like the mythical fates, casting indifferent glances at the young men eagerly signing away their lives. Then comes the mandatory medical exam. An unshaven doctor takes out a pair of calipers and carefully measures the dimensions of Marlowe's skull. When Marlowe asks why, the doctor casually notes that he never sees the men when they return. And anyway, the real changes happen on the inside. These encounters feel deeply wrong. They don't evoke the launch of a triumphant scientific or moral endeavor. Instead, they operate with the eerie, disjointed logic of a fever dream, signaling a descent into madness before Marlowe even sets foot on a boat. 30 days later, sailing down the coast, Marlowe watches a French man-of-war anchored in the oily swell. It is firing 6-inch guns into the edge of a colossal, empty jungle. A tiny flame darts out, a feeble screech echoes, and nothing happens. It is an act of sheer, incomprehensible insanity. This aimless violence introduces what Marlowe calls the flabby, pretending, weak-eyed devil of colonial exploitation. He expects to find ruthless conquerors, but he finds a rapacious, pitiless folly. When he disembarks at the company's outer station, the physical reality of the civilizing mission is immediately clear. A chain gang of emaciated African men slowly toils up a hill, carrying baskets of earth for a railway that doesn't seem to exist. The company calls them criminals, but they are just broken victims of an outraged law. Seeking shade, Marlowe stumbles into a ravine he names the Grove of Death. Here, laborers who have sickened on unfamiliar food and brutal conditions are simply allowed to crawl away and slowly starve to death in the greenish gloom. Stepping out of this horror, Marlowe meets a miracle of immaculate tailoring. It is the company's chief accountant, wearing a high starched collar, white cuffs, and varnished boots, keeping his bookkeeping in perfect apple pie order. The accountant mentions a dying agent resting in his office, but he doesn't express pity. Instead, he complains that the sick man's groans distract his attention, making it incredibly difficult to guard against clerical errors. This immaculate ledger keeper, standing 50 feet from starving men, captures the true nature of the enterprise. The administrative machine doesn't ignore the horrific human toll. It normalizes the suffering as an irritating distraction from its profit margins. To reach his command, Marlowe undertakes a grueling 200-mile march inland to the central station. But when he arrives, he finds his steamboat resting at the bottom of the river, its hull torn out in a suspiciously stupid accident. Stuck repairing the wreck for months, Marlowe watches the European agents wandering the muddy yard. They carry long staves, talk behind each other's backs, and perform no actual labor. Their only true religion is extraction. The word ivory rings in the air, whispered and sighed as if they are praying to it. Yet for all their greed, they are staggeringly incompetent. The station manager keeps his position mostly because he never gets sick, purposely delaying supply runs to sabotage his rivals. Meanwhile, the official brickmaker has been waiting around for a year, producing exactly 0 bricks. The height of this absurdity revolves around a simple handful of rivets. Marlowe has steel plates to fix his boat, but no rivets. Meanwhile, the station is flooded with ghastly glazed calico and spotted glass beads, but the essential tools needed to actually function are nowhere to be found. There are no heroes here building the foundations of tomorrow. The station is a collection of men desperate to steal a fortune, entirely lacking the organizational skill, the proper tools, or the moral courage to do anything but squabble in the mud. The final shred of the company's dignity dissolves with the arrival of the El Dorado exploring expedition. This band of men wanders into the station with tents and donkeys, acting like sordid buccaneers eager to tear treasure out of the bowels of the land with all the moral purpose of burglars breaking into a safe. When Marlowe finally gets the steamboat patched and heads up the river toward the legendary inner station agent, Mr. Kurtz, the atmosphere violently shifts. The petty, squabbling bureaucracy is left behind. In its place is an empty stream, a great silence, and an impenetrable forest. They are creeping through an environment so ancient and indifferent that the humans feel like they are trespassing against an implacable, brooding force. Facing this immense wilderness, Marlowe realizes his sanity depends on staying entirely focused on his work. He constantly watches for sunken stones and hidden sandbanks, clinging to the immediate mechanical demands of steering the boat to avoid confronting the terrifying silence. The sheer scale of the jungle strips away his ego. Out here, the European myth of inherent superiority evaporates. The landscape doesn't care about their sophisticated titles, their clothing, or their supposed civilizing mission. Conrad forces his readers to look past the propaganda. He shows that European civilization is not a profound moral high ground. It is merely a series of comfortable, surface-level routines, little monkey tricks, invented to keep us distracted from the vast, indifferent wilderness and the profound, savage darkness waiting in our own hearts.